All right, welcome to Book by Book. We are going to go through 1 Kings chapters 13 through 16 tonight. So it's a lot of content that we're going to cover, but we're also going to be, a lot of things just kind of happen. So there's not a lot of like subtle things going on. So I don't think we have to do a lot of deep dives on things. Greetings, Kevin. Hello, hello. Let's just jump in, starting with chapter 13. Let me give background. Last week we saw the schism between the northern and southern kingdoms, and Jeroboam took the lead of the northern kingdom, and Rehoboam, Solomon's son, was leading the southern kingdom. And the part of Jeroboam's plan was to consolidate his influence by ensuring that the people of the northern kingdoms never had to go back to Jerusalem to worship. And so he had the two temples, the two altars on the north end and the south end of the kingdoms. And so that's where we're going to jump in today, with Jeroboam being confronted by the man of God who's going to come to him. And so we're going to look at a rising influence of the of the prophetic voice in Israel. And so we're going to have several different prophets, and we're going to end today with an introduction to Ahab. And Ahab is going to be the king that's going to carry us through basically the rest of First Kings. And so First and Second Kings, they do this alternating picture between the north and the southern kingdoms. And so they try to line up the chronology between the two kingdoms. And there are times where there's little gaps where it's like, what's happening here? And the easiest explanation with these gaps and inconsistencies is there could be some kind of instability, in particular with the northern kingdom, instability over who is actually going to be king. And we're going to see some of that tonight, because unlike the southern kingdom, it doesn't just follow one family line. And so we're going to have some regicide, which is the killing of a king. We're going to have coups. We're going to have all kinds of fun stuff happening in the northern kingdom because they're a mess. And so let's jump in with Jeroboam leading in the northern kingdom in 1 Kings 13. By the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah to Bethel as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. By the word of the Lord, he cried out against the altar. Altar, altar, this is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David. On you he will sacrifice the priests of the high places who make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you. That same day, the man of God gave a sign. This is the sign that the Lord has declared. The altar will be split. I love hearing kids upstairs or downstairs. It's great to hear kids. So if you heard that on the video, there was a stampede of children. This is the sign the Lord has declared. The altar will be split apart and the ashes on it will be poured out. When King Jeroboam heard what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel, he stretched out his hand from the altar and said, "Seize him." But the hand he stretched out toward the man shriveled up so that he could not pull it back. Also, the altar was split apart and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God by the word of the Lord. Then the king said to the man of God, "Intercede with the Lord your God and pray for me that my hand may be restored." So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored and became as it was before. The king said to the man of God, "Come home with me for a meal, and I will give you a gift." But the man of God answered the king, "Even if you were to give me half your possessions, I would not go with you, nor would I eat bread or drink water here. For I was commanded by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water or return by the way you came." So he took another road and did not return by the way he had come to Bethel. All right, so the unnamed prophet, this man of God, who is compelled by the Lord to go up to Bethel and speak against Jeroboam and his altar. And part of the reason behind this is the Lord promised to Jeroboam if he would keep the covenant, that Jeroboam would have a similar promise that God had made to Abraham or to David. And so him setting up these alternate sites was a breaking of the covenant between God and Israel. And so this is the rationale behind this confrontation. And the prophet, he's not afraid to speak against the king, but here we also are given a future picture of what is going to happen. So the sign to confirm that the prophet is speaking is like his prophecy will come true, that a king named Josiah will come and sacrifice these priests of these counterfeit altars on the altars. And it's not a sacrifice of trying to like earn God's favor here. That's not the intention. It is a slaughtering of these priests. It's not like he's not trying to make atonement like an animal sacrifice in the Old Testament. It's like, no, these priests are just going to be killed on these altars. And so it's going to be hundreds of years from this moment. And so it gives him an immediate sign that the altar will split open. And these altars were most likely stone altars that were placed in a way where they could put the animal on, and then the ashes would fall into the altar area. And so these stones would have been big and heavy, and it would take work to take them apart. And so as the priest, or as the king sees this and like commands him to seize him, like the first judgment on Jeroboam is his hand being frozen, basically. And there is a medical condition that could lead to this, and it is essentially a cerebral hemorrhage or embolism that could create this a combination of things that could do this to his arm. It's called hemiplegia. And so it's a real thing that could happen. And so the prophet prays for him, and he's healed. So Jeroboam doesn't live the rest of his life with just an outstretched arm. But at the same time, then the altar is split apart and the ashes fall out. And so that is the sign to say, like, well, if you are a true prophet, if what you predict doesn't come true, then you're not a true prophet. And so we have a future prediction down the road that none of these people will see because they'll all be long dead. But God has a plan here for bringing justice to the northern kingdom's disobedience. And then it's confirmed with an immediate sign. And this is an important piece because part of the tension with what's happening in the northern kingdom is their worship of other gods is going to continually pull them away further and further from Yahweh. And so there will be all kinds of false prophets in the northern kingdom, but there will also be at least one true prophet. And that prophet's name is Jonah. And Jonah is, and we'll get to Jonah. He's in 2 Kings. Jonah is my favorite book in the Bible. I spend so much time with Jonah, but he's in the book of Kings as a very nationalistic prophet. And so, but God still uses him in his ministry, and we read that in the book of Jonah as well. And so, so there's, even though the northern kingdom has a long run of apostasy and turning away from the Lord, God is not quick to abandon them because they are still his chosen people, and he still wants to give them opportunity to repent and come back into the covenant with himself. And so the prophet prays for him, Jeroboam is healed, and then he invites him to have a meal. And this meal would be potentially a gift, a kind of trying to make peace with the man of God and Jeroboam. And anytime you have table fellowship represented in the scriptures, you should notice, like, pay attention to say, like, all right, this is people actually coming together. And the man of God has instructions from the Lord to say, I am not here to reconcile with Jeroboam. I am not here to say, like, I'm on your side. Even though I interceded for you, I'm not on your side. And so he says, no, I will not eat with you. I'm not even go back the same way I came, because I don't want anybody to know how to intercept my path. Basically, he's like, I came up here to do this thing, and I'm going home. I'm out of here. And so he leaves. And we'll come back to Jeroboam in a little bit later. But in verse 11, it picks up, and we get an introduction to another prophet here. Now there was a certain old prophet living in Bethel, whose sons came and told him all that the man of God had done there that day. They also told their father what he had said to the king. Their father asked him, which way did he go? And his son showed him the road the man of God from Judah had taken. So he said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me. And when they had saddled the donkey for him, he mounted it and rode after the man of God. He found him sitting under an oak tree and asked, are you the man of God who came from Judah? I am, he replied. So the prophet said, come home and with me and eat. The man of God said, I cannot turn back and go with you, nor can I eat bread or drink water with you in this place. I have been told by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water there, or return by the way you came. The old prophet answered, I too am a prophet, as you are. And an angel said to me, by the word of the Lord, bring him back with you to your house so that he may eat bread and drink water. But he was lying to him. So the man of God returned with him and ate and drank in his house. While they were sitting at the table, the word of the Lord came to the old prophet who had brought him back. He cried out to the man of God who had come from Judah, this is what the Lord says. You have defied the word of the Lord and have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. You came back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you not to eat or drink. Therefore, your body will not be buried in the tomb of your ancestors. So this is a weird story, right? We have a prophet, a man of God, and there are distinctions that are being used here as well. The fact that this person from Judah is called a man of God, that's a different word than the word for prophet in Hebrew. And it's a similar function, but I think the writer of First Kings is trying to help us have distinction in the two people. And so he is coming as a representative of the Lord, and so that's why he's a man of God. But the prophet here, the old prophet, is a liar. He's a false prophet. And part of the danger for the people of Israel, so the man from Judah, he is being a kind of type of Judah as well. Like even if you are faithful, you still have to discern truth from falsity, truth from lies. And so there may be people who claim to be prophets. And as the people of God, you have to be able to discern what is God, what truly is the word of God for the people of God. And so the man comes and the writer tells us he was lying to him. And so he tricks the man from Judah and they go and eat. And that's when the word of the Lord comes to the false prophet to say, what are you doing? And so even a false prophet could be right sometimes, but we have to think through, like, what is the prophet's job? What is the prophet's role? The prophet's role in the Bible is to call the people of God into covenant faithfulness. When they veer off, the prophet is constantly calling people back. And so for the man from Judah, he should have known, I should not listen to anybody else tell me something that I know God told me. Like, tell me something other than what God told me to do. He should have known better. And so, but because the guy said, well, I'm a prophet, come home and eat a meal with me. I was like, oh yeah, we're all on the same team. We're both prophets. That is dangerous. And right now in our culture, we do have a rise of people who are claiming to be a prophet, and making all kinds of claims that's, we can't verify, we can't say this is in line with the Lord. And so we have to ask now, like, if somebody's making a claim about God told them something, we should go back to say, did God already say that someplace else? Or is this a new teaching? Is this a contradictory statement that is not in line with what God desires for the character of his people, for the character of the church, like these kinds of things. If there's something that's outside of orthodoxy, but someone says, I'm a prophet, we should say, no. We should be willing to say, that is not a prophet. And so if somebody makes a claim about like this next election, I know there's going to be prophets that come up and they will say, this person's going to win. If that person doesn't win, that's not a prophet. Okay. And so just stop listening to those false prophets. And so if they made claims about the previous election that didn't come to pass, those are false prophets. Stop listening. Like reading through the Bible, prophets rarely ever had a comfortable life. True prophets rarely ever had a comfortable life. They rarely even really wanted to do the work because they knew how risky it was. And we have made this realm of the prophetic in our culture, and in particular in church cultures, so wishy-washy and so low stakes. Well, it's like, no, this is high stakes stuff. You're claiming to speak the words of God. You should be careful. You should be cautious. And so the same is true for followers of these false prophets. If they're claiming to speak the word of God, we should hold them to a high standard. In the Bible, false prophets would be executed. We do not have that authority, and I don't want that authority. The easiest thing to do with a false prophet is to just ignore them. Let them die a quiet online death of obscurity and ignoring them. So what happens to this man? Because now he's been told, you're not going to be buried in your father's household. So when the man of God had finished eating and drinking, the prophet who had brought him back saddled his donkey for him. As he went on his way, a lion met him on the road and killed him, and his body was left lying on the road with both the donkey and the lion standing beside it. Some people who passed by saw the body lying there with the lion standing beside the body, and they went and reported it in the city where the old prophet lived. When the prophet who had brought him back from his journey heard of it, he said, "It is the man of God who defied the word of the Lord. The Lord has given him over to the lion, which has mauled him and killed him, as the word of the Lord had warned him." And the prophet said to his son, "Saddle the donkey for me." And they did so. Then he went out and found the body lying in the road, and the donkey and the lion standing beside it. The lion had neither eaten the body nor mauled the donkey. So the prophet picked up the body of the man of God, laid it on the donkey, and brought it back to his own city to mourn for him and bury him. Then he laid the body in his own tomb, and they mourned over him and said, "Alas, my brother." After burying him, he said to his sons, "When I die, bury me in the grave where the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones. For the message he declared by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel and against all the shrines in the high places, the towns of Samaria, will certainly come true." Even after all this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. Anyone who wanted to become a priest, he consecrated for the high places. This was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth. So the man leaves and a lion kills him. Now, what's so surprising here is lions generally are not ones to kill something and then not eat it. And so this is why the man of God, the prophet from the northern kingdom recognizes that God is doing something here. The prophet is dead. He's reaping the consequences of believing the liar, but the Lord is holding back the lion's appetite. So instead of just being mauled and eaten and the donkey even being eaten and killed, like the donkey's there, the man's body is there, and the lion is just sitting there. And so this is a warning to even the false prophet to say, like, look, God is more powerful than you think. God can overcome the natural inclination of the lion to communicate to you what you need to know. And so that's why he takes him home and buries him, because to not be buried is a great shame. And so he buries him in his own plot. And he says, like, when I die, I want to be associated with this guy. And so it could be that there's a sense of repentance here with this false prophet to recognize that God is doing something and that this message is true and all of these things. And so we don't really have a strong indication that the false prophet is fully repentant, other than to recognize what the guy said was true. But we do get this summary statement that Jeroboam must have heard of this somehow, because even after all this, Jeroboam did not change his ways. And he continued to do all the things that God said, don't do this. And the appointing of priests from any tribe, anybody could be a priest, that was a direct violation of the covenant as well. The priests were supposed to be Levites. And so there were Levites in the northern kingdoms, but they were not, they were no longer considered to be the authorities here. And so Jeroboam will continue to lead Israel and continue to go down this path that will lead to ultimate destruction. That's where we pick up in verse 14, or chapter 14. At that time, Abijah, son of Jeroboam, became ill. And Jeroboam said to his wife, go disguise yourself so you won't be recognized as the wife of Jeroboam. Then go to Shiloh. Ahijah, the prophet, is there, the one who told me I would be king over the people. Take 10 loaves of bread with you, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and go to him. He will tell you what will happen to the boy. So Jeroboam's wife did what he said and went to Ahijah's house in Shiloh. Now, why she needs to be in a disguise, maybe because he wanted to go to Ahijah in secret and make sure that nobody saw his wife go to the prophet. But then also, he is sending her with gifts. And so there's a misunderstanding of what the prophets are really supposed to be doing here. Like, you can't really bribe God to do something for you. And so he's sending her with these gifts to try to get the prophet to give her a favorable report. And the gift itself, that doesn't explain exactly why, but perhaps the 10 loaves of bread, this could be, reminding us of the altar of showbread in the tabernacle. There were 12 loaves of bread placed on the altar. And those loaves were supposed to represent the tribes of Israel. And so the northern kingdom has 10 tribes. And so that could be part of what's happening here is like, hey, take these 10 tribes represented by this bread and bring it to the prophet. He's the one who knows what's going on. He's the one who can give us insight. So now Ahijah could not see. His sight was gone because of his age. So this costume really wasn't worthwhile. But the Lord had told Ahijah, Jeroboam's wife is coming to ask you about her son, for he is ill, and you are to give her such and such an answer. When she arrives, she'll pretend to be someone else. So Ahijah heard the sound of her footsteps at the door. He said, come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why this pretense? I have been sent to you with bad news. So that's an interesting note here, because she was sent to him and he is saying, I have been sent to you. Like he didn't go anywhere, but he was still sent. I've been sent to you with bad news. Go tell Jeroboam that this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I raised you up from among the people and appointed you ruler over the people of Israel. I tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you. But you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commands and followed me with all his heart, doing only what was right in my eyes. You have done more evil than all who lived before you. You have made for yourself other gods, idols made of metal. You have aroused my anger and turned your back on me. And so this gives us a little bit more indication of like why is David a good king? Because we read his story, we read his life, and he was not always that great. He had his own sin, he had his own brokenness. But nowhere in the stories of David do we see him ever follow anyone other than Yahweh. And so the sin of Jeroboam is the leading the people astray into idolatry. And so David, a man after God's own heart, was not that David was perfect, but he never fell into idolatry. And so that's a key distinction here. And so David is going to be the standard for all of the kings going forward. And so David is the standard for the good king. And then we're going to see with the northern kingdoms, like Jeroboam will come up again and again. He was worse than Jeroboam. He continued the sins of Jeroboam. He kept on this path of Jeroboam. And so we have this contrast right now that's developing that we'll see consistently in the rest of the book of Kings. And so because of this, in verse 10, I'm going to bring disaster on the house of Jeroboam. I will cut off from Jeroboam every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will burn up the house of Jeroboam as one burns dung until it is all gone. Dogs will eat those belonging to Jeroboam who die in the city, and birds will feed on those who die in the country. The Lord has spoken. And so just as Jeroboam was lifted up by the power of God, his whole household, his whole dynasty will be destroyed by the power of God and by the decree of God, and completely burned up and consumed. And so in the city, any dogs were generally scavengers. People didn't keep dogs as pets. And so they would be basically the ones that would go through and clean up the streets for you. And so any of the Jeroboam's descendants in the city would be eaten by dogs, and any that died out in the countryside would be eaten by carrion birds. And so like anyone who is going to eat a dead thing already, descendants of Jeroboam will be covered, is what the Lord is saying here, which is gross. I mean, this is some stark imagery. It's kind of gross, but it is the way of these scavengers. Verse 12, as for you, wife of Jeroboam, go back home. When you set foot in your city, the boy will die. All Israel will mourn for him and bury him. He is the only one belonging to Jeroboam who will be buried, because he is the only one in the house of Jeroboam in whom the Lord, the God of Israel, has found anything good. So the only person who's going to get the honor of an actual burial is the son, this unnamed son of Jeroboam. The Lord will raise up for himself a king over Israel who will cut off the family of Jeroboam. Even now, this is beginning to happen. And the Lord will strike Israel so that it will be like a reed swaying in the water. He will uproot Israel from this good land that he gave to their ancestors and scatter them beyond the Euphrates, because they aroused the Lord's anger by making Asherah poles. And he will give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam that has committed and has caused Israel to commit. And so, like, the wife of Jeroboam is told, when you go home, your son's going to die. That's hard news. But then also, like, every part of Jeroboam's kingdom, his family, will be wiped out. But then the nation itself, there's also this warning that is, again, hundreds of years away, but the nation of Israel will be taken out of the northern tribes and taken beyond the Euphrates. And so in 722 BC, and this is in like the 900s right now, in 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire is going to come, and they're going to do exactly this. The Assyrians are the Persian people. So in like Iran, like that area, they will come and they will take the northern kingdoms into exile. And so this is the first direct warning of a pending exile in the book of Kings. So then Jeroboam's wife got up, left, and went to Tirzah, which is the capital at this time. As soon as she stepped over the threshold of the house, the boy died. They buried him, and all Israel mourned for him, as the Lord had said through his servant, the prophet Ahijah. The other events of Jeroboam's reign, his wars and how he ruled, are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. He reigned for 22 years and then rested with his ancestors, and Nadab, his son, succeeded him as king. So that's part of the regular conclusion of the kings. Like, they reigned this long. You can read more about them in this other book. We don't have that other book, which is a bummer. So there's several times we read about these kinds of books: the annals of the kings of Judah, the annals of the kings of Israel, the testimony of Yashur. Like, there's all kinds of different like books that are referred to. And someday when we are in eternity, we can ask the Lord about it directly. But for right now, they're gone. And so, so Jeroboam is going to have this very short dynasty that will be taken away. And so some people read through this story, and I pointed out, like, it seems kind of harsh that the boy who the Lord says is the only one with any goodness in him is going to die. And so did the Lord strike this boy? And so that's part of the tension here. And so it seems like the boy was going to die anyway. Like, he had an illness, he was going, and it was terminal. And so the Lord simply did not intervene to rescue him. which again, it's hard. It's a hard thing to like process and accept. Like, because God is, we want to understand God is good and loving and wanting good things for us and for his people. At the same time, we see the wickedness of the northern kingdom, and this wickedness led to all kinds of corruption and failure and brokenness in their society. And so there's tension here, and we should not read over these things as like, well, and then he died and that's it. But to actually sit and wrestle with like, I don't like that. That's okay. To read it and say, I don't like this story. I don't like what's happening here. And we're not supposed to like it. I remember going to Saving Private Ryan when it came out in the theater. I've only seen that movie one time. And, today is the day that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, which, led the United States to finally enter into World War II, and on and on and on. And like that opening scene in Saving Private Ryan was so heartbreakingly brutal that it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, understanding how awful war is, this helped me understand how awful war is. I don't have to go and revisit that. I don't have to like it. I don't have to say, man, Saving Private Ryan, I love that movie. I don't love that movie. Is it a powerful movie? Yes. But I don't like that story because I don't like war. Like, it's not something that I should be like, let's throw that on a Friday night. No. And like these same kinds of stories are not things where she just be like, tell me the story of Jeroboam's son. Like, I'd rather not. And so, yeah, so there's going to be a lot of this kind of grief as we walk through the stories of the kingdoms because of the sinfulness and the rebellion of the people. And so that's something we just kind of have to sit with. And the writers of scripture allow us to sit with it. They're not trying to hide this stuff from us, which I also, I appreciate. And it's one of the things where I'm like, I think I can put confidence in the scriptures because they tell the truth even when it's ugly. And whereas, you follow leaders today, they want to spin everything so they look good. And the writers of scripture are not trying to do that for any human actor in the scriptures. So let's pick back up. We'll jump over to the southern kingdom here in verse 21. Rehoboam, son of Solomon, was king in Judah. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city of the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel in which to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite. And so that detail right there is something, an Ammonite. The Ammonites were enemies of the people of Israel, and they were supposed to be annihilated completely because of their corrupt worship and practices. And they were not great people. They were against the people of Israel as they were coming up out of slavery in Egypt. And so, so they were not supposed to really even be around anymore. But this is an indication. Remember, Solomon had many wives from all kinds of different countries, and that led to his own idolatry and corruption. And so Rehoboam is the son of an Ammonite. So that should be a red flag as we're reading through. Well, that's not ideal. Judah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. By the sins they committed, they stirred up his jealous anger more than those who were before them had done. They also set up for themselves high places, sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. So there's all kinds of gross, detestable worship happening. There were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. The people engaged in all the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. So they're a mess. And Rehoboam is letting it all happen. And it even reads as like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's worship all the gods. And part of it is he's, if this is what the people want, I want to give the people what they want. Keep them happy. Keep them satisfied. That sounds great for him. That's part of what he's doing here. So in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem. He carried off the treasures of the temple of the Lord and the treasures of the royal palace. He took everything, including all the gold shields Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made bronze shields to replace them and assigned these to the commanders of the guards on duty at the entrance of the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the Lord's temple, the guards bore the shields, and afterwards they returned them to the guard room. So this attack from the king of Egypt, Shishak, this is one of those things that has been verified in external sources from the Bible, that the Egyptian king came and fought in this land. And so this is like one of those things where, world history and biblical narrative, they agree. Sometimes they don't. Like sometimes it's hard to make those things match, but this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, this happened. We know this happened. But we're also in this situation being told of the continuing decline of Jerusalem under Rehoboam, because instead of all of the gold and opulence of Solomon's kingdom, they had to replace it with bronze, which is not as pretty as gold. And so like it's a pretty significant downgrade. And these gold shields would have just been up and on display. And now, like when Rehoboam comes to the temple, they take out the nice shields, like they bring out the nice silverware when guests are coming over. And then when he goes away, they lock them back up because it's like, we can't afford to keep these out. We got to keep these nice. It's like putting your plastic over the couch in the formal living room for when the Pope comes over, like that kind of thing. And so like, this is a huge downgrade for them. And all because Rehoboam is allowing all of this corrupt idolatry and practice to continue and flourish in the kingdom. And so so it's not good. Verse 29, as for the other events of Rehoboam's reign and all he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? There was continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and Rehoboam rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah, she was an Ammonite, and Abijah, his son, succeeded him as king. And so, again, this transition from one king to the other. But again, we don't have all of the events that Rehoboam did, but they were written down at some point. And so someday, when we're in eternity, we can read them if we really want to. Verse 15, or chapter 15. In the 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijah became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. And there's some question about this Abishalom, if this is his related to Absalom. And so if Abijah's mother was the daughter of Absalom, like there's some confusion and some uncertainty of who this is. And that's one of the thoughts, that maybe she's part of this splinter off of David's line. Not really critical to the story, but just in case you're wondering. Verse 3, he committed all the sins his father had done before him. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord, his God, as the heart of David, his forefather, had been. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem by raising up a son to succeed him and by making Jerusalem strong. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life, except for the case of Uriah the Hittite. There was war between Abijah and Jeroboam throughout Abijah's lifetime. As for the other events of Abijah's reign, all he did, and are they not written in the annals of the kings of Judah? There was war between Abijah and Jeroboam, and Abijah rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David, and Asa, his son, succeeded him as king. So the key here for us in this section is just to note that for David's sake, the Lord continued to work through his descendants. It's not because Abijah deserved it at all. It was just it was the promise he made for David, because David did not turn away from the Lord's commands, meaning like he did not pursue idols. And his great sin is not hidden here, because we're noted this case of Uriah the Hittite, the sin of taking advantage of Bathsheba and having Uriah killed. Like the writer is not hiding that from us. Like you need to know this happened. But still, it is for David's sake that the Lord has sustained this line so far. And again, conflict between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And so whether or not it was a constant like hot war between the two nations, or a cold war where there was just tension, or just skirmishes along the border, we're not given all the details, but there was tension and conflict. That's what we need to know. And so Asa comes into the picture, and he's the first good reforming king. And so a little ray of sunshine for us. In the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 41 years. His grandmother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done. He expelled the male shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. He even deposed his grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother because she had made a repulsive image for the worship of Asherah. Asa cut it down and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although he did not remove the high places, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his life. He brought into the temple of the Lord the silver and gold and the articles that he and his father had dedicated. So Maacah, who we don't really know like what her deal was, but highlighting her twice, she had some power here. She had some authority, and she was adding to the corruption of the people of Israel as the queen mother. And so he deposed her. What deposed her means, I don't know if it means like put her in jail, exiled her, executed her. We don't know, but it was enough. He did enough action to remove her influence and destroy this image that she made for the Asherah. And the Asherah is there's some question about what this means. So Asherah poles could be phallic symbols, or it could just be trees that were planted in forests. There's a lot of different understanding of what these could have been, but this symbol, this image that was made, was enough that it was like, this is not just a tree. It's repulsive. And so he destroys it. And he kicks out all the male shrine prostitutes. One of the things that we should highlight as well here is the part of the idolatry of the people of Canaan was their sexuality was tied up with their worship. And so the priests were actually required in the tabernacle and the temple to wear many levels of clothing that would keep them from any kind of nudity. Because so many of these other idolatrous cultures, sexuality was tied to their worship of their idols. And so the priests were like forbidden from having anything close to nudity. And so these shrine prostitutes were significantly offensive to the Lord. So he did all these things except for cut out the high places. And the high places, that probably was a project that was just too big, because any hill could have been a high place. And so people would just worship at these high places because they believed they would be closer to the Lord. And so even if they're not worshiping a false god, they're not worshiping where God wanted them to worship. And so that's part of the tension, is getting the people back into right relationship with God in Jerusalem. So there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, and we haven't met him yet. We'll get to him in just a minute. Throughout their reigns, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, king of Judah. So Baasha is creating a trade embargo, essentially, on the trade route from Egypt to go into the other kingdoms. And so he is cutting off any chance of trading with other countries. And so Asa then took all the silver and gold that was left in the treasuries of the Lord's temple and his own palace. He entrusted it to his officials and sent them to Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, the son of Hetzion, the king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. Let there be a treaty between me and you, he said, as there was between my father and your father. See, I am sending you a gift of silver and gold. Now break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so he will withdraw from me. Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa and sent the commanders of his forces against the towns of Israel. He conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel, Beth Maacah, and all the Kinnereth in addition to Naphtali. When Baasha heard this, he stopped building Ramah and withdrew to Tirzah. Then King Asa issued an order to all Judah. No one was exempt, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and timbers Baasha had been using there. With them, King Asa built up Geba in Benjamin and also Mizpah. And so he's making this treaty with another nation. So Damascus is north of Israel. And so he's sending envoys, most likely by ship, around the northern kingdom of Israel, making a treaty with the king of Aram. And so the king of Aram then starts attacking on the north. And so Baasha is attacking on the south. And he's like, I'm being attacked up here. So all these people go up there, right? And so part of the brilliance here then is Asa is like, all right, see that building he built? Let's take it apart and let's build our own in our country. And so their fortifications were their fortifications. Like it was literally a trade. So he's made this treaty, but at a high cost. He gave everything he had to send this treaty, to make this treaty, to preserve the future trade routes for the kingdom of Judah. As for the other events of Asa's reign, all his achievements, all he did, and the cities he built, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Judah? In his old age, however, his feet became diseased. Then Asa rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of his father David, and Jehoshaphat, his son, succeeded him as king. And so, so Asa lived a good long lifetime, 41-year reign. At the end here, people are trying to figure out like what were his diseases that made on his feet. Some people are saying gout, but we don't really know for sure what was happening. So he died and his son will take over. We won't meet his son for a good long while. We're going to focus in on the northern kingdom for the rest of this time tonight. So we transition. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the ways of his father and committing the same sin his father had caused Israel to commit. Baasha, son of Ahijah, from the tribe of Issachar, plotted against him, and he struck him down at Gibbethon, a Philistine town, while Nadab and all Israel were besieging it. Baasha killed Nadab in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, and succeeded him as king. As soon as he began to reign, he killed Jeroboam's whole family. He did not leave Jeroboam anyone that breathed, but destroyed them all, according to the word the Lord had given through his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. This happened because the sins of Jeroboam had committed and had caused Israel to commit, and because he aroused the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel. As for the other events of Nadab's reign and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout their reigns. And so Nadab has 2 years of ruling while he is out fighting against the Philistines, the enemy of both Judah and Israel. Baasha sees an opportunity to kill him, to strike him down, and to take the throne. And so now, instead of the whole dynasty of Jeroboam is over, and now Baasha comes in to take over. And all of this, again, as it says, is in fulfillment with the Lord's command or word through Ahijah, and again, continuing ongoing conflict between northern and southern kingdoms. In the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, son of Ahijah, became king of all Israel in Tirzah, and he reigned 24 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the ways of Jeroboam and committing the same sin Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. Then the word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani, concerning Baasha. I lifted you up from the dust and appointed you ruler over my people Israel, but you followed the ways of Jeroboam and caused my people Israel to sin and to arouse my anger by their sins. So I am about to wipe out Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like that of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Dogs will eat those belonging to Baasha who die in the city, and birds will feed on those who die in the country. So not great for Baasha. As for the other events of Baasha's reign, what he did and his achievements, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings Israel? Baasha rested with his ancestors and was buried in Tirzah, and Elah, his son, succeeded him as king. Moreover, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, to Baasha and his house because of all the evil he had done in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger by the things he did, becoming like the house of Jeroboam, and also because he destroyed it. So 41 years is a long time to rule, even though he was corrupt. And or 24 years, sorry. He was corrupt and he did great wickedness, but he had a long reign. But still, the promise of the Lord is the same. Like, I raised you up from the dust. I put you here, and you squandered the opportunity. And so the Lord is going to remove the house of Baasha as well. Verse 8, in the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, became king of Israel. He reigned in Tirzah 2 years. Zimri, one of his officials who commanded his chariots, plotted against him. Elah was in Tirzah at the time, getting drunk in the home of Arza, the palace administrator at Tirzah. Zimri came in, struck him down, and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah. Then he succeeded him as king. As soon as he began to reign and was seated on the throne, he killed off Baasha's whole family. He did not spare a single male, whether relative or friend. So Zimri destroyed the whole family of Baasha in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken against Baasha through the prophet Jehu, because of all the sins Baasha and his son Elah had committed and had caused Israel to commit, so that they aroused the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, by their worthless idols. As for the other events of Elah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the king of Israel? So Elah, 2 years, Zimri sees Elah is drunk as a skunk and kills him. So the previous king who has been killed was, killed in a military coup. He's like, I'm just going to take him out now. This one, the guy's drunk. And he probably was fed up. He's like, this guy is the worst. I can do better than him. And so he takes him out. This is not a very long reign here as well. So in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah 7 days. A 7-day reign. The army was encamped near Gibbethon, a Philistine town. When the Israelite in the camp heard that Zimri had plotted against the king and murdered him, they proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel, that very day there in the camp. Then Omri and all the Israelites with him withdrew from Gibbethon and laid siege to Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel and the royal palace and set the palace on fire around him, so he died because of the sins he had committed, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord and following the ways of Jeroboam and committing the same sin Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. As for the other events of Zimri's reign, 7 days, and the rebellion he carried out, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Israel? 7 days. He had 7 days. And Omri, the army is like, no, we like Omri better. And so we're going to put Omri in charge. And so they leave their fighting at the Philistine city, and they go and lay siege around the capital of their country in Tirzah. And so Zimri recognizes, I'm stuck. So he just kills himself, sets the whole citadel on fire. Now, this will lead to a reestablishment of where the capital is going to be. So this is the shortest reign in all of Israel. So if you are ever on Jeopardy and they say, this king ruled for 7 days, remember, it's Zimri. Who is Zimri? So Omri comes up into power in verse 21. Then the people of Israel were split into 2 factions. Half supported Tibni, son of Ginath, for king. The other half supported Omri. But Omri's followers proved stronger than those of Tibni, son of Ginath. So Tibni died and Omri became king. Now, I don't know how Tibni died, but at this moment, we have these 2 competing factions, Omri and Tibni. And so there's a leadership gap here in the count. This is where we see some of the counting gets a little wonky because Omri's kind of king, but not fully king. So there's conflict here. So in the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri became king of Israel, and he reigned 12 years, 6 of them in Tirzah. He bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver and built a city on the hill, calling it Samaria. after Shemer, the name of the former owner of the hill. But Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord and sinned more than all those before him. He followed completely the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, committing the same sin Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit, so that they aroused the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, by their worthless idols. As for the other events of Omri's reign, all he did and the things he achieved, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Israel? Omri rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and Ahab, his son, succeeded him as king. So Omri is significant because under his leadership, they moved the capital to Samaria. And when we read through the prophets, we will hear the prophet refer to the northern kingdoms by Ephraim, by Samaria. And so those are, small, like it's a metonymy, I think is what the technical term is, where you use a part of the thing to talk about the whole thing. And so instead of just saying, Israel, you are corrupt, it will say, Samaria, you have pursued adulterous ways with the idols, and so we'll see that because Samaria is the capital. So just FYI, if you're ever reading in the prophets on your own, like, why are they so mad about this one city? They're not. They're talking about the whole country, which is referring to Samaria. So, so they are, it's a mess. Omri's not great, but he did worse than Jeroboam, and even further than Jeroboam. But then also his son comes into the picture here, Ahab, and we'll wrap with introducing Ahab, and then we'll jump into Elijah and Ahab next week. So verse 29, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, and he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. In Ahab's time, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of his firstborn son, Abiram, and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, in accordance with the word the Lord spoken by Joshua, son of Nun. So Ahab is worse still. So it was like, this king's terrible, this king's terrible, this king's terrible. But wait, this king's even worse. And Ahab, we'll see the conflict between Ahab and Elijah is going to highlight the total corruption of the people. But Jezebel is a major influence in Ahab's sinfulness. And so Jezebel is most likely as a princess also in this kingdom, probably also has a priestly high priestess kind of role. And so she's bringing all of that idolatry in with her. And so they build temple to Baal in Samaria. They build these Asherah poles. It's not good. It's all bad. It's all bad. And then we get this little note here in 34, which seems so out of place. But in Ahab's time, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho, and he laid the foundations at the cost of his firstborn son and the gates with his youngest son. And this was a curse from the book of Joshua. It wasn't that the Lord said to Joshua, if anybody wants to rebuild Jericho, this is what they should do. But it was a curse that says, if anybody rebuilds Jericho, this is what it will cost. They will lose their sons because of this. Because Jericho was supposed to remain completely destroyed as a testimony of God's power. And so Hiel here is like, well, I want to rebuild Jericho. And it seems like what he did, and it was not uncommon in these pagan cultures, was to actually like bury their dead sons in the wall. And so there are these ossuaries, these bone boxes in some of these older cities of like young people, children. as like a sacrifice to their God. And so Hiel was like, well, that's what they did at that city. And this is what Joshua said, but here we can have Jericho. It's worth it. And so the loss of the sanctity of life to rebuild Jericho, which is probably for trade and military protection, all these different things that Jericho could serve as, Hiel thought those were more valuable than his firstborn and his youngest sons. I mean, that's just, it's here to give us a picture of the corruption under Ahab's reign. And so, and we'll get more. Don't worry. There's more. Ahab is the worst. And so the rest of First Kings is going to walk us through the life of Ahab. But we're also going to see Elijah step into a confrontational role as the prophet of God in the northern kingdom. And so the northern kingdom is so far gone in our eyes. They're terrible. They're so corrupt. But the Lord still sends prophets to try to call these people back into right relationship. And while the kings will reject it, there will be some faithful among the people in the northern kingdom. And so that's part of what's going on in the rest of First Kings. So any questions online or in the room? Any questions on these 4 verses? We did a lot of
I have one.
Yeah, Jane.
Samaria. Is this even when Jesus when he meets the woman at the well and she's a Samaritan and the apostles are kind of freaked out about this?
Yeah.
Is this where it starts? Is this why?
No.
Okay.
I mean, Samaria is not a good place in the Old Testament, but the main reason why they are uncomfortable with Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman was because after the exile, so the people are taken away in the exile.
Mm-hmm.
The Assyrians at this point then repopulate this region with people from other countries.
Oh.
And so this creates some intermarriage between the people of Israel who remain and the people from these other countries, which is creating a corruption of the land. Because God said, don't marry the people from other nations, right?
Right.
So then the region of Samaria becomes this unclean area. And so to talk to a Samaritan, there's like this, they're unclean because they're not fully Jewish as part of the thing, but then they also didn't hold to recognizing all of the prophets. And so they had this different kind of religious system that they had built in place through tradition, really only reading the books of Moses. And so there was that. And then there's just the uncomfortableness of a man talking to a woman in the middle of the day. Like, you're not married to her. Why are you talking to this lady? And so there's that tension as well. So
there's more to it than that.
There's
coming up.
There's so much more.
I just wondered because as soon as I heard it, I was like, I wonder if this is where it starts. You know?
Well, I mean, it's not the start, but it could be a start. The real challenge by the time of Jesus was just the uncleanness of the area because they were seen as pagans. So in John chapter 4, it says Jesus had to go through Samaria, and John is giving that as a flag to us or to his readers because no good Jew had to go through Samaria. They would go around because they didn't even want to go there.
I'm in the chosen group, and they made a big deal of that in the chosen series, but Jesus chose to go through.
Yes. Yeah. And why did he have to do it? Because he had an appointment with this woman at the well. She didn't know, but he knew. He's like, I got to talk to that lady. And that's where she is. So, if you guys haven't watched The Chosen, it's so good. It's so good. I highly recommend it. It's awesome. So the new season 3 starts on Sunday, and you can live stream it, whatever. I'm not sponsored by them. So any other questions? Great question, Jane. That was a great question. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, going back, when we're talking about the Israelites were taken away into captivity, you said the
Mhm.
Assyrians. The Assyrians and the Babylonians not the same, are they?
Yeah, those are two different empires. And so
Okay.
the Assyrians were first. So 722, they take the northern kingdoms. In 586, the Babylonians take the southern kingdom.
Okay, and that's when Daniel was taken into captivity,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of what I'm thinking I'm going to do here with the order of how we're going to approach these books is we're going to go through First Kings and Second Kings.
Mhm.
And I might throw in Jonah in there when we get to Jonah's events, because it's interesting. Because that all happens before the Assyrian captivity. And so when we're done with the books of Kings, I think I'll jump over to the prophets. And so we'll start working through Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and we'll start working through the prophets. And then we'll come back around and do like the writings. So Psalms, Proverbs. So this is years down the road at that point. But so this is a ways, but it's hard to really get the sense of the prophets outside of the narrative. And so I want to hit the story and then jump right into the prophets so that we have that story still kind of fresh as we're walking through. I mean, Isaiah is 66 chapters, so it's going to be a long time. But that is the plan that I'm going to work through. So, but yeah, the Babylonians, Assyrians, two different empires. And then after the Babylonians, we've got the Persians and the Medes, and then we've got the Greeks and then the Romans. There's a whole bunch of empires that we're going to be interacting with over the next several hundred years of biblical history. So Jane, are you raising your hand?
Yes.
Okay.
So the prophets are working or come about during this king's period of time.
Yeah.
And then the Assyrians come and take the northern kingdom, and then Babylonians take the southern kingdom. I'm really kind of paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
But that's why we're going to do the prophets, so that we know it was during this time of the different kings that were messing up all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
And we'll read, as we read through Kings, we'll see Isaiah jumping into the story. Like, and so like there will be indications to us, oh, this is where Isaiah shows up. But we won't jump over to Isaiah at that point. We'll let Isaiah be Isaiah.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know. I'm fairly new to this, so I never know if it's a different person or not.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So even today, I don't want to throw more confusion onto here, but we meet a prophet named Jehu in what we read today. And then later there's a king named Jehu.
Yeah, that's
right?
what got me.
Yeah.
So like there's going to be some confusion around names. And I'm part of the reason why I wanted to do this group was try to just help us see how the whole story kind of fits together and get a sense of what scripture is telling us in the context of when it happened. So
and the consistency of the message.
Yeah.
Is what I'm the consistency of God and his faithfulness and his reliability through the whole thing. He never changes his words and never changes what he expects. And so
yeah. And I'm so glad, Jane, that you're in this group. And my hope is like, and the reason why I record this is because I hope like someday down the road, people will be like, what is that? What's happening in those books? And like I say, oh, I actually talked about that. And you can go read it here or listen to it here. Because like I did in my first year at Bible school, we did a whole semester on the Bible. And I just was thrown in and had to read the whole Bible in a semester, and I was lost. I was like, what's happening here? What is going on? This is so much, so fast. And so slowing down a bit, giving us the big picture, kind of want to help us.
I teach history, or I taught history when I was teaching. So it's very interesting to me, especially when you pointed out the link to the outside sources, is we know this happened and we have a recording of this in history that matches up, and that's fascinating to me. Is that it's chronicled and that every once in a while they have these touch points that match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fun. And then, yeah,
Great
later
fun.
we'll get to the New Testament, and there's this guy named Josephus who confirms a lot of the stuff that happened in the New Testament. And yeah, it's great. I love it. I love it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. This also reads a lot like if you are a fantasy reader, like there's some palace intrigue in like Game of Thrones and those kinds of things where it's like, yikes, this is a mess. And so when you read like the stories of like those high fantasy kings fighting with one another, it's like, hey, we got that in our book too. So it's exciting stuff. So
Totally.
but this is real.
Yeah. 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 It's
yeah.
very interesting to me. Very interesting.
All right. Well, good. Any other questions? Anyone here? We're good in the room. Anyone online?
I have kind of a question. Just break this down for me. Whether there was the north and south, basically the northern Israel and then Judah, correct?
Yes.
And so these kings were like Visha, king of Israel. Did that encompass Judah also?
No.
That was just the northern territory?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to
So the
clarify.
10 tribes of the northern kingdoms,
Mhm.
and then the southern kingdoms were Judah and Benjamin, and like Simeon kind of got in there too. But that was the basic division was right at just north of Jerusalem is where the kingdoms broke apart.
Okay.
And so there's
So these reigns are going simultaneously of each other.
yeah.
Okay.
So like Asa has this big long reign, and there are 5 kings, I think, during his reign. And so while Asa's in Judah, he's got
Yeah.
all these other
5 of
kings
them.
in Israel that are turning over while Asa is still king.
Okay.
So yeah. So the chronicler here is trying to give us a picture of like these two kingdoms happening at the same time. And it gets a little confusing. And so there are charts, if you want charts. If you Google like kings of Israel and Judah charts, like you can see and how it breaks down. You can get an image of that. So if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Or a
And
timeline.
they kept following idols over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Every one of them did not follow, they followed their fathers, but none of them went back far enough to follow David.
Right. In the northern kingdoms, there are no good kings.
Yeah.
None. They're all bad. They're all corrupt. The southern kingdoms, there are some good kings.
Mhm.
And so a reforming king will come up, and then his son will be like, oh, life is good and comfortable and great. Let's all worship these other idols. And then that'll go on for a while. And then another reforming king will come up. And so even the southern kingdom is not ideal. So
No.
yeah. And that's why they get taken into exile by the Babylonians. So yeah, it's all a mess. But the message that I want to make clear is God is faithful even when we are not. Like that's the real reason why like these stories are so important is God keeps chasing after his people. So, which is good news for us, right? So,
Yeah.
all
Don't
right.
give
Well,
up hope ever, right?
what'd you say?
Don't give up hope ever.
Right.
He will
Right.
still chase after you. It's okay.
Yeah, he will never give up on us. So, well, let's wrap here, and then we'll come back next week. And next week it will be our last week before some Christmas stuff. So we'll take a few weeks off around the holidays, Christmas and New Year's. Then we'll come back after New Year's at some point in January. So, all right. So we'll so next week will be our last group for a while. So, all right. All right, everybody have a good night.